Good evening, everybody. Welcome. This is a special meeting of the Gainesville City Commission. We have one item on our agenda tonight, establish a proposed millage rate for fiscal year 22. Commissioner Johnson will be joining us. She said go ahead and start without her, and I expect her relatively soon. So with that, is there a motion to adopt the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Motion by Commissioner Ward, second by Commissioner A. Santos. All in favor, say aye. All opposed, motion passes. Was that a no?
It was a no for me.
Motion passes 5-1 with Ariola in dissent and Commissioner Johnson absent. I'm going to say this every couple meetings until you're tired of me, but masks are optional. We encourage people to do whatever makes them feel most comfortable. I will definitely still be wearing mine. I've got an elderly mother who I love very much, who I want to keep safe. And I was just speaking with two friends of mine who got vaccinated in January with the Pfizer vaccine, didn't go into restaurants, were very careful, and both contracted COVID, are in quarantine right now. So the vaccine is highly effective. It is not universally effective. We have an enclosed space, and so I will continue to wear my mask, but they are optional. We certainly encourage you, if you are not vaccinated, to wear your mask for the benefit of others. If you are vaccinated, that's probably a little bit more safe. Okay, so we have a relatively extensive presentation. So Mr. Feldman, I'll turn it over to you. Sir, what I would like to ask of the commission, if you have technical questions as we go or clarifying questions, by all means, push your light and I'll acknowledge you to get those answered. If you have more deliberative comments or editorial comments, let's save those till the end of the presentation as we get into a more general discussion. But certainly if there's just something you don't understand or need a little bit more context on, just buzz in there and I'll get that answered before we move too much further down the road. And so with that, I will turn it over to you, Mr. Feldman.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to have a presentation led by Budget and Finance, our Budget Manager, Karen Fiore. Just to let you know, there are other city staff here, department heads. They are downstairs, so if you have a question regarding a specific department, certainly get them up here to answer.
Great, we appreciate that, Ms. Fiore. Welcome. I also want to acknowledge that we have Ms. Ramos and Ms. Wilson with us. Between the three of those brains, we've got a massive amount of budgetary power and intellect. So I know that we could probably get any questions answered that we need between the three of them. So Ms. Fiore, welcome, and the show is yours.
Thank you. Karen Fiore, Budget Manager. Are you able to hear me correctly?
I think I can, yes.
Okay, great. I'm going to keep my mask on then.
Great.
And Omi, am I directing to change the slide to you? Just say it out loud. Okay, great. So if I could have the presentation. Great. If you can go to the next slide. So our end goal today, as you mentioned, will be to set the tentative millage, but we have a couple items we would like to discuss. We'd like to review our general fund baseline, some of the recommended increments. We have some discussion points, some budgetary levers. We'd like to talk about some of our other funds and possible increments within those funds. And again, to set the proposed tentative millage rate. Next slide.
And actually, Ms. Fiore, before you even get into that, it's been a while since we discussed this, and I just think for folks watching as well, our budget doesn't go into effect until October 1st. We don't hear and adopt the first and second readings of the resolution and ordinances until September. Here we are, sort of early to mid-May. July, jeez. Yes. Again, thank you for having my back. Takes a village. What is the requirement as far as adopting a tentative millage rate? Why are we doing this? at this point, you know, instead of just waiting till September.
Sure. Would you like me to respond? Would you like the city attorney?
If you know the answer, then that's, I know that you know the answer. Yeah, go ahead and just kind of clarify for everyone.
Okay, so we have until August 4th to submit what's called the DR 420. And you have so many days, it's like 35 days. So we're here today to adopt the maximum millage, and then we'll come to you in September, and you will adopt the preliminary budget, and then in September, at the end of September, you'll adopt the final budget. And during those two meetings, you'll adopt the final millage as well, and the final fire assessment in September. So the first reading in September, you do the fire assessment, and then that's done. And then the final reading will be your final budget and your final millage.
Thank you. And the reason for that is, can you talk a little bit about the trim notice?
Yep. So there's, I'm not going to give all dates, but you have so many dates after, or days once you adopt your maximum millage. You have to submit to the Department of Revenue what that is, and then there's a time frame when then the property appraiser has to send out the trim notices to all of our residents. And so, again, it all backs up to a calendar or timeline. So you're only given so many days to adopt, mail, advertise, and be in compliance.
Yeah, thank you. And so all local governments are doing this right now. You know, for property owners, they're probably familiar with the trim notice. You get it in the mail. For renters, you're probably not. That's going to the property owner, and you never see it. But it's sort of a heads up to all of the people who are property taxpayers. This is what your local government has tentatively agreed to, has set. It will not be more than this. It may be less than that, depending on final adoption. But sort of the idea is that people have an idea of what's being discussed. They don't get a tax bill well after September, and we're not able to participate in that process. And so this is, I guess, would say sort of the middle of the process. We've had many preliminary budget discussions going back to January. Right now, we have to get this tentative millage fire assessment in for purposes of the trim notice to be mailed out by the property appraiser. And then finally, all local governments will adopt their budgets in September to go active for that October 1st fiscal year. So anyway, it's confusing, especially for folks that just sort of live and breathe this stuff. And I appreciate you taking a little time to help us through that, to kind of clarify what we're doing in the middle of July.
And we also have to, it's important to note that we have to go around the school board, the county. You know, we're not the first in line, so they have the right to go first. So we have to plan our schedule in these meetings all around their schedules, and we can't do it at the same time. So some dates just don't work because they've already taken those time slots.
Yeah, we're the little fish
Yeah.
out of all this. Okay, thank you, Ms. Fury.
You're welcome. Next slide. Before I get into the numbers here, I just want to let you know that just as of today, the state has changed some of their revenue projections. So the numbers you're going to see in front of you will not be the very final numbers that we will present to you in September. They're going to be a little bit fine-tuning here and there. I mean, today the half-cent sales tax changed about $112,000. And we're expecting to hopefully get the communication service tax projection from the state tomorrow, so that may change these numbers slightly. But for presentation purposes today, I'm not going to go into all those changes. We didn't have enough time to revise the presentation. So we received the July 1st final taxable value, and that came in at $8.1 billion, which is 6.6% increase over the fiscal year 20 final valuation, and this actually resulted in $2.73 million in additional revenue for us compared to the fiscal year 21 adopted budget. Currently, the fiscal year 22 is at a surplus of a little over $3 million, and fiscal year 23 a surplus of $922,000. However, these numbers do not include any increments or decrement adjustments. Next slide. Reviewing what's in the fiscal year 22 baseline assumptions for the revenue, and this is comparing to fiscal year 21's adopted budget. Again, July 1st numbers resulted in $2.7 million in additional property tax revenue. We had $5,400 increase for local option gas tax, and that's after, again, the state has put out their projections. $400,000 in increase in utility tax, $73,000 increase in communication service tax. And one might say, every year you tell us that this is a revenue stream that declines year over year, and that's true. However, in fiscal year 21, when we set our budget, we were very conservative and we assumed that this revenue source would be even lower. So this $73,000 increase just puts us back on track compared to the actual collections. And I mentioned a few minutes ago, we're still waiting for the state on this revenue, so this may change. $856,000 increase for the fire assessment. This is keeping the fire assessment at $133, and that was approved at the maximum rate yesterday. $1.2 million increase, and this is your new rental housing program. $1.1 increase in state revenue sharing. Again, the state has put out their projections, and we have that included in our budget. The half-cent sales tax, as I mentioned, went down about $112,000, but still an increase of $1.2 million for fiscal year 22. And $1.3 million increase for fees for services. Fees for services here include your 5% that we do every other year for your fee schedule. It also includes contracts increases such as your SRO contract. And you have your new parking increase that you approved yesterday is in this line item, as well as your indirect services from the other departments to the general fund. A decrease to fiscal year 22 in the general fund was $2,002,013, and this was the general fund transfer, bringing it down to $36,283,000. And you've already, don't go any further, we're good there. So for fiscal year 23, now these assumptions are comparing to the fiscal year 22 baseline. We're assuming about a 2.5% increase in property tax. That would bring in a little over $1 million. 2% increase for local option gas tax, about $19,000. $467,000 increase in utility tax, and these are based on GRU's 3% for electric, 5% for water, and 1% for gas. $92,000 increase for the fire assessment, which is about a 1% increase. $84,000 increase for state revenue sharing, which is about 2%. Again, we talked about a half-cent sales tax. That's not the exact number, but we're still assuming about a 1% increase. It would be about $83,000. And $854,000 for your charges for services. Decreases here for 23. Here's where you're seeing going back to the normal reduction, about 2% for the communication service tax. That's about $73,000. And then an additional $2 million in the general fund transfer, bringing it down to $34,283,000. Next slide. Looking at the revenues by major revenue category, overall, with the new numbers, we're about 4.1% overall increase compared to fiscal year 21. This slide, that very first line, shows a property tax, an increase of 7.1%. And if you recall a few slides ago, I said it was 6.6%. And the reason for that is this slide is comparing fiscal year 21 to 22's budget, and the previous slide was comparing the assessable value. So that's why you're not seeing the exact same percentage. Some large changes, license and permits. There again, you're seeing your fire assessment and your new rental housing. The intergovernmental increased about 19.5%, a little bit different from what you're seeing there. And that's your state revenue sharing increase of $1.1 million and your half-cent sales tax of $1.2 million. The 9.3% in your charges for services, as mentioned, is for your 5% increase for your fees, as well as your contracts and indirect services. And then your general fund transfer reduction of 5.2% reduction. Again, about 4.1% increase over fiscal year 21's adopted budget. Next slide. Reviewing the general fund baseline expenditures for fiscal year 22 and 23, we have a decrease overall in personnel services of 1.3%. However, this still includes 2.5% merit increases for our community builders, as well as the IAFF negotiated 3-year contract. However, due to the new pension obligation bond, our contribution to the pension funds reduced, and that's why you're seeing the overall reduction in personnel services. 1.1% increase overall for operating expenditures, and 29.7% increase for debt service. So this is the other side of the entry. The contribution went down, but your debt service increased, and that's why you see the large increase there. Same for 23, you have your 2.5% plus any negotiated contracts, very small amount of operating increases, and the 2.9% for your debt services, which is related to your new POB bond. Next slide. Expenses by major category. The takeaway here is looking at your personnel services. Here you can see that you're at 57% of your total expenditures for the general fund are related to your personnel services. You can see that, again, you're only at 1.1% increase for your operating, which is a very small amount compared to 21, and your debt services, large increase for the 29.7%. Next slide. Recommended increments. Next slide. The next 2 pages, you'll see what staff has recommended for increments, and if this will result in a balanced budget for fiscal year 22, but there will be a deficit for fiscal year 23 in the amount of $197,000. The first 2 increments listed are for the city auditor, one-time expenditures for the implementation of audit software, and then the recurring $5,000 a year for the implementation of external consultant forensic accounting expertise and other subject matter expertise. Office of Equity and Inclusion has a recurring request of $121,000, and this is for case management system, external legal system, and contract service for compliance investigation. Again, a total recurring of $121,000. We have $100,000 for street light tree trimming. In a previous presentation, I had mentioned that this was not an allowable expense in our tree mitigation fund. That is why you're seeing it here in the general fund. Again, $100,000 recurring. We have $1.9 million set aside for capital facility maintenance projects. Here we have a lot of HVAC and roof repair needs. There's $150,000 recurring for strategic initiatives for the software tool to support Perform GNV, the integration of the new website with the Citizen Relationship Manager, the CRM software tool, and then the special events software. Again, reoccurring for $150,000 total. GPD has some IT needs. So in fiscal year 22, one-time expenditures totaling $47,000. Fiscal year 23, one-time expenditures totaling $117,000. These items include DLT tape system, FDLE logging server, server OS software upgrade, and network software upgrade. We would also like to include $167,000. Next slide, please. Oh, you already went past. Okay. The last one on that previous slide was $167,000 one-time increment in fiscal year 22, and this would allow us to replace around 148 of the general government laptops. If you can stay on this slide. The first increment here under, nope, go back one, please. The first increment is for budget and finance. This is for a new accountant 2 position that will be specializing in grants. We're recommending that this position be split funded with RTS, and you'll see that other half of this position later on in the presentation. The next 6 increments are to address the community health program, the CRP program. This is for phase 2 of the program. This will be for fiscal year '22, total expenditures a little over $258,000. For fiscal year '23, it will be a little bit over $437,000. Fiscal year '22, they're requesting the addition of 3.5 FTEs. These FTEs would be community health director or some type of title like that. These are not set in stone. An EMS responder, resource technician, and a half program specialist. And then in fiscal year '23, the request is for a half-time program coordinator, 2 EMS responders, and 1 resource technician. Again, that's for phase 2 of the program. The remaining increments here are for PRCA, Parks and Rec, and we're asking to convert current temporary positions that we pay through temp agency to full-time status here with the city of Gainesville. So that would be additional 2.5 positions for Parks and Rec. Next slide. So the total increments for fiscal year '22, a little over $1 million, and then your capital of $1.9 million results in a balanced budget for fiscal year '22. The increments that I just reviewed for fiscal year '23 would result in a deficit of $197,000. For fiscal year '22, it would be an additional 6.5 FTEs within the general fund, and for fiscal year '23, it will be additional 3.5 FTEs in the general fund. To fund this deficit for fiscal year '23, it would require possibly the use of fund balance, tax increases, or expenditure reduction. The staff does not recommend the use of fund balance for any one-time expenditures. Next slide. Some discussion points. Next slide. I've already mentioned this. We're still waiting for the communication service tax from the state. We do not have currently in this budget anything for the potential Office of Youth Services. We do not have any commission increments. And then we have the general fund transfer discussion for this Thursday for fiscal years '23 through '27, what will come out of that. And we're still working on identifying funding for the Fare Free for RTS. We are looking into the possibility of using CARES or ARPA funds. However, if that is not possible, then we're going to have to do a transfer from the general fund to RTS for that portion. And that's about $115,000. Next slide. So this slide shows you the projected trend in revenue and expenditures. A few things to note about the slide. We're projecting the revenues with the decrease of $2 million per year starting in fiscal year '22 for the GFT. We're including a increase of about 2% revenue growth from '22 to '23 and about a 5% increase in expenditures from '22 to '23. The black line is the GFT, reducing it by $2 million each year. And today, when I was looking through this slide, I went back a couple years to find out when the last time we were down to about $26 million for the general fund transfer. And actually, I had to go back to 2005, where we were at about 26.8 that year for the transfer. So it's been quite a long time since we've been at 26 million there. So that was a standout to me. Also, I wanted to point out that in fiscal year 2018 and 2020, both those years, you increased the factor fire protection unit as well as the millage rate those years. But you can see that the revenue and expenditures stayed pretty much in line with each other for each of those years, all the way up through fiscal year 24, where the expenditures start to take off. Next slide. Here's just a visual to see the debt service just for the general fund through fiscal year 27. A couple items to note here. For fiscal year 21, you had an uptick there, and that was due to the new pension obligation bond. It was not a full payment that year. But then in 22, you're going to have the entire full payment, so that's why you see that full bump. And then in fiscal year 25, you will actually have been paying off your refunding note of 2014, and that was a 1.6 million yearly payment, so that's why you're seeing the reduction there. But it was just a visual to show you just the general fund debt portion, not all of general government. Next slide. Some budgetary levers. Next slide. So the effect of the cumulative 2 million GFT reduction on the general fund. Thought I had a question. So the important takeaway from this slide is that the increase adds on top of each other year over year. It's not just a one-time that year $2 million reduction. So by 2027, you're looking at a cumulative effect of about $42 million. Next slide. This is the same data, just looking at it a little bit different. So your blue bars, that's your taxable value, and we're assuming a 2.5% increase each year in the value. Keeping the expenditures at the baseline. If you can go back a slide. Keeping the expenditures at 22's baseline, and the point is that the black line represents what the millage rate would need to be increased to make up for that $2 million deficit each year. Lee, did you want to add anything to that slide? Okay, kind of stumbled. The next slide, please. Some expenditure levers. We can have no increments. We could use fund balance, again, not recommended for one-time expenditures. And we can have some baseline reductions. Next slide. I'd like to go over some of our other funds, starting with our proprietary funds. Next slide. So we have two types of proprietary funds. We have the enterprise funds. Those are the funds set up where we charge the outside for fees, such as your stormwater management, your solid waste, your building inspection, and your RTS system. And we used to have the Ironwood fund also here, but we transferred that over to the general fund in fiscal year 2020. And then your internal service funds. So these are funds set up where we charge the internal user. So here you have your fleet funds, your general insurance fund, and your employee health and accident fund. Next slide. Next slide. Your stormwater management utility fund. This fund is set up to protect our water quality. So we do so by maintaining our ditches, our basins. We do our street sweeping as well as mosquito control. And this is funded through charges based on equivalent residential units, and these are billed through GRU monthly. And the fiscal year 22 new rate per equivalent residential unit will go up to $10.40, and this is based on our every other year 5% fee increase. Next slide. Looking at the revenues for this fee, you can see a bump for 22, again, correlates with your 5% increase. Next slide. Looking at expenditures for this fund, actually for 22 and 23, expenditures were a little under what we project for revenue, so that gives us an opportunity to put some back for reserve for capital projects. You can see that top piece of the bar, the stacked bar, that's what that is. So we have a balanced budget of a little over $9 million for the stormwater management. Next slide. Your solid waste fund covers the third-party contract for waste and recycling collection. This is also billed with GRU monthly. And annually, out of this fund, we transfer $1.42 million to our roadway resurfacing fund. And the reason for that is to help with the damage that the hauling trucks have made to our roads and curbs. This also is included in our fee schedule, so there's an increase of 5% every other year, and that's for fiscal year 22. And this fund will charge user fees and expenses based upon a new solid waste contract. So once that contract is in place, the budget for solid waste will probably need to be adjusted and amended. Next slide. So currently projected without the new contract, revenues are actually falling low compared to expenditures. So that top bar for 22 and 23, that yellow section, that's the use of fund balance for solid waste. Again, the projections for revenue and solid waste are slightly under the expenditures, so we're going to need to use $224,000 for both years for fund balance. And if you go to the next slide. Slide 30, you went the wrong way, I think. Here you can see the expenditures jumped in 21 through 23. Some of the items here that are taking place, indirect service has increased for all of our funds. Also in this fund, we had a large increase in the tipping fees, so that has increased our expenditures. As well as starting in fiscal year 20, we had an increase in personnel service in this fund, and definitely need for the new contract to take place to see if this, the need for fund balance will hopefully decrease.
And Ms. Fiore, if you could please
Yes.
pause for a question. Commissioner
Sure.
Sacco?
Sherry, a quick question, maybe I just don't know what happened, but between 2020 and 21, our revenue went down a significant amount, and I would have imagined that, given the planned increments, it would have stayed stable or increased. What
Yeah.
happened there?
So we were very conservative in 21 for our budget, a lot of COVID issues, so that was one factor. And at the time, the collection was probably low when we made our projection, so that factored into what was adopted as well.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
If I could just add, so since solid waste is billed with the GRU, on the GRU bill, when the collections are down for GRU, they correspond for both stormwater and solid waste.
Thank you.
Great. Next slide. Your building inspection fund, revenues here are generated through building permits, and the revenue is very restricted. It must be used for building inspections and supporting functions. In this fund, you find that many times you will receive the permit years prior to any inspections are being done. So it's very hard to project out these revenues and expenditures in this fund. We are actually in the process of a new rate study, and we expect to roll that out in fiscal year 22. You can stay on this slide, please. In this fund also, you can see the need to use fund balance for fiscal year 22 and 23. The revenues are not keeping pace with the expenditures. Again, as mentioned, it has a lot to do with when some of those permits were pulled early, from prior years, and now just the expenditures are taking place. So if you go to the next slide, you can see that we had to increase our personnel services in 21 to cover some of those inspections, which resulted in the use of fund balance for 22 and 23. You also have other increased expenses happening here, one being the indirect cost. Next slide. Your regional transit system, the revenue sources here, you'll find the University of Florida, the FTA and FDOT grants. You have local option gas tax revenue here. You have your service contract with Alachua County, Santa Fe. You have your fares, passes, and advertising. And then you also do have general fund support. Next slide. Total revenues for 22, about 29.9 million, and 23, 30 million. You can see that very far to the right that the major revenue source here comes from UF, followed by your operating grants. Next slide. Here is the other half of the accountant 2 for the grants. Again, funded half between the general fund and half with RTS. The additional 0.5 position for RTS. Next slide.
Real quick, actually, if you go back one, I'm guessing for that grant specialist, the idea is that it will more than pay for itself, right? I mean, they're going to work to get RTS grants, and what was the other, who we splitting it with?
The general fund
General
with
fund.
budget and
So the
finance.
idea is that they would bring in more revenue through grants we receive if we have a person sort of dedicated to doing that than it would cost us. Am I?
So Mayor, let me jump in on that.
Sure.
So one of the items that we've been working with the auditor on is grant compliance, and we need more of the accountant side to deal with the grant compliance, which is both on the RTS, they're our largest grant recipient, and then general fund has some through others. So this is part of that effort to get up to speed and make sure that we have the right staffing in place.
Okay.
We are bringing on a grant writer by converting the former intergovernmental relation position that we have in our office, so that we have more ability to write grants and seek them than we've had in the past. So we're trying to do both.
Okay, but this position is more of the back end.
Correct.
Right. Verifying, reporting, things like that. Okay, thank you. Commissioner Johnson, on this point?
Yeah, is the intergovernmental affairs position, is that, are the responsibilities gonna remain the same, and then you're adding grant writing capabilities to that?
We're not completely certain yet. The old intergovernmental affairs position, in my opinion, was duplicative of our lobbyists. It was just basically just a conduit between that, which I think our other staff can assume. You're probably familiar with the summaries of the different meetings that occurred. That was something that I added as a responsibility, and I haven't figured out how to duplicate that yet. But we do have a tremendous need in seeking out grants and writing them. That needs to be our primary focus for governmental relations at this point.
Okay, please continue.
Great. Slide 37, if you can bring that back up. So, thank you. So this slide is showing the expense for RTS, and it's slightly over the projected revenue. It's important to note, though, that there's over $3 million in depreciation sitting in these expense budgeted lines for 22 and 23. And that's an accounting entry that we're required to budget for, but doesn't necessarily mean that that full amount will be posted to the ledger.
Okay, thank you. If you please pause. Commissioner Duncan Walker.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This actually has to do with the solid waste. I apologize. I put my light on and I guess we didn't see it. So I just wanted to ask about the status of that solid waste contract.
Commissioner, I can speak to that. So we are in the process of finalizing the invitation to bid documents. They're sitting on my desk. My plan is this weekend to do the quality control on them, and then within 2 weeks have those posted on the street.
Okay, invitation to bid,
Yes,
and in 2 weeks it'll be posted.
that's the plan.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Fiore?
Thank you. Next slide. Internal service funds, I'd like to review the fleet management. So the fleet management fund is set up for your cost of vehicle acquisition and replacement, as well as the operations in maintaining the fleet. It's an internal fund, so the revenue here comes from your other funds. They pay into this fund for replacement and maintenance. The monies collected in excess of the expenses are used for fleet maintenance and replacement management. Next slide. So the revenues you're seeing here are just for the fleet maintenance fund. It is not including the replacement fund. We combine them on our internal financial statements, but for budget purposes, we keep them separate to see if we're collecting enough in operating to cover the maintenance and the positions. And then we try to keep track of just the replacement separately. So in our minds, it's two different funds for budget, but it's combined on our financial statement. So here I'm just showing you the revenue that goes to the fleet maintenance fund. And unfortunately, the 22 and 23 projections, the revenues are behind on the expenditures. So it's resulting in the need for $706,000 in fund balance for 22 and $842,000 for 23. And the department, as we speak, are looking into their fee structure. Are we charging general government and GRU enough for the maintenance and repairs and parts? So that's being looked at as we speak. If you go to the next slide. The expense side, you can see large jumps here. You had depreciation. You also have your indirect increases here. And parts in themselves have escalated quite a bit. So your expenditures are growing much faster than your revenues. But again, the department's working really hard to figure out their fee structure and determine if there's a need to change that. So currently, the use of fund balance is coming out of your fixed fleet fund. Next slide. Wild spaces, public places. Next slide. So this is the 9-year half-cent sales tax. And the revenue here must be used for recreation capital projects and operational costs for new programs associated with wild spaces half-cent sales tax. Next slide. You can see the revenue fluctuates a little bit here. The dip in fiscal year 21, that is your adopted budget for fiscal year 21. That is not your actuals. So we assume that due to COVID, we were going to have some loss in revenue. I can tell you that the revenue has been strong. So when you see actuals in later presentations, I assume it will be greater than the 6.5. Projection for fiscal year 22, 23, still conservative at the $8 million mark. Next slide. Looking at the expenditures, so it just started ramping up in fiscal year 17, so that's why you see very little there. That was just probably the personnel services to begin with. And then we finally got into some projects and programs in 19 and 20. And then 21, that's your budgeted number. That's your adopted. We did not adopt any of the programs or projects. Those were adopted separately during this year, fiscal year 21, and I've included those resolutions if you wanted to see what was adopted. That's why you're not seeing anything on that line. However, for fiscal year 22 and 23, we are showing you the actual programs that we hope to be able to accomplish in those 2 years. Next slide. Some of those programs and projects include $2.2 million for the Thelma Bolton Center improvements, $1.9 million for Forest Park improvements, $30,000 for the Sweetwater Branch Park Master Plan, $850,000 for improvement for bikeway and trail connections, to name a few. So total for $6.2 million in fiscal year 22 and $3.6 million in 23. These are not new projects. The commission has seen these projects on their master plan that were approved earlier. Next slide. This slide represents the discontinuation of the wild spaces, public places step down into the general fund. So these expenditures will continue to be absorbed using wild spaces funding. $383,000 for fiscal year 22 and $467,000 for fiscal year 23. And it will be additional 2 FTEs that will be required in fiscal year 22. Next slide. The Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area. Next slide. So the city and county agreed to eliminate the boundaries for the 4 reinvestment areas, and we made we made it a department in the general fund now. And so there's no boundaries. However, the county and the city still have an interlocal agreement set. And if you go to the next slide, the revenue here comes from, like I said, the interlocal agreement. The bottom half of this chart, the stacked columns, represents the county portion, and you can see that year after year it will reduce by $100,000. And then the top portion is the city contribution. So we receive still property tax that we funnel directly into this fund to support the Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area. The next slide. Again, in fiscal year 20, that's when we started this new reinvestment area. So you don't see much action there as actuals, but then we started to ramp up in 21 for adopted, and we continue for 22 and 23. Some of the programs, thank you, for 22 and 23, model block, housing strategies, we have Eastside Food Mobility Hub of $1.2 million, 8th Avenue and Waldo improvements, we have GTEC maintenance and economic development finance programs, to name a few, for a total of $6.4 million in fiscal year 22 and $5.5 million in fiscal year 23, and no additional FTE requests. So to set the tentative millage rate, first wanted to review the 22 rollback rate. To calculate that rate, you take the July 1st assessable value, that's at $8.1 billion. You subtract out new construction, brings you down to the $7.8 billion number. Prior year ad valorem proceeds is the $40 million. You divide that into the adjusted rate and times it by 1,000, and then you're able to calculate your rollback rate, which is 5.1487. And what the rollback rate means is that that will be the millage rate that you would have to adopt to generate the same amount of revenue as last year. So the revenue that you would generate would be a little over $40 million, and that's at a 96% collection. We currently have this baseline at 5.2974 for 22. There's no increase in millage, and the collection at 96% would be $41.3 million that you've seen in earlier slides.
Thank you. And if you please pause, Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. Would someone mind speaking to this slide before, number 52, the economic development finance programs, the last line?
I would have to ask the department, unless Lee knows.
So these are the general programs, and Ms. Vidolfin, I think, is around. She can go into more detail on them. I'm not sure if she is here or on Zoom.
I'm here.
Okay.
Sarah Vidal, actually, GCRA. So that's money, Commissioner Johnson, that's been set aside for economic development, of course. So within that, we are supposed to come up with a bunch of programs to help support small, local, diverse businesses. So phase 1 of this is actually getting back into the GTEC building. Actually, the report that we're doing around the GTEC building and its functions will help support these economic development finance programs. We went to the GCRA board 2 months ago and did a presentation on some of the thoughts. Of course, the plan talks about supporting businesses in healthcare, also in food-related businesses and services, healthcare, food, and there's one more, and it's beyond me at the moment. So we've kind of been given our marching orders. We're getting our housing programs out first, which should be done next month, and then we're able to focus on working on this along with CAPER, who also has a piece of it as well.
Thank you, Ms. Vidal. Will the commission be made aware of the programs that you all come up with, and how will that
Oh,
happen?
absolutely. Yeah, so the ideas we'll have to bring forward, and then of course, creating the programs themselves, they will come back to you for review and approval.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Commissioner Ariola?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a question on the slides. These are increments being added to the GCRA expenditures on top of the pre-existing program list, or is this the full total of what will be expended in the next fiscal year?
This will show what the plan is for expenditures for next fiscal year and fiscal year 23.
Gotcha. So which one of these is the job training program that we've been working on?
So and Ms. Vidal can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't believe we actually have an appropriation for that. However, if you go back to the slide before, you will see that while we're collecting the $7.3 million each year, we're not spending all of that. And so we have a fund balance once we have a project that we'll be able to then or the commission will be able to appropriate from the fund balance in the GCRA Special Revenue Fund for that or any other projects.
Okay, that makes sense, and I'm familiar with how we expend CRA dollars. I would feel more comfortable to have a line item for that because that work group will be completed during the fiscal year, and there will be an implementation figure that we can begin to work on, and I'd like for that to be in the next fiscal year. And it was my understanding that that's the direction that we were moving in.
And we certainly can do that if we have a figure. I've not seen one yet. So we can put a number in there and then either appropriate more money if necessary or less money if that becomes a number. But I'll need to have a number to put in for that.
Okay. Well, we do not have a Gainesville feasibility study completed, but based on what other municipalities have seen, we can sort of guess. So that information is potentially available, and those are nice. Some of those figures are nice round, zeros all across. So I think I would just feel more comfortable putting it there so that the general public can be aware that that's an expenditure we are intending.
So, Commissioner, I can get with you and we can work on what that number needs to be. It's not relating to the tentative millage rate tonight, and you're not adopting a proposed budget tonight, so we can make sure that there's an appropriation in there for the September budget.
Very well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So again, in regards to this table, there's at least one or two items I see on here that I know appeared in some of the ARP requests as well. So this is going to be fluid to some degree. And as GCRA, it's a little bit different than what we're dealing with for the rest of the budget. So hopefully there's some room to work there. So thank you.
Ms. Fiore?
Yes. Slide 55, please. So this we're bringing back just for informational purposes to see what the required millage rate would be for the reduction in the GFT. The next slide also is for informational purposes based on the conversation last night to give you an idea of what increases in millage look like, how much you would generate in revenue. Next slide. So for the millage rate discussion, again, the 22 proposed budget currently is balanced. We have a few tweaks that we have to do, as mentioned earlier. Remember, it does not include any commission increments. Your 23 plan is currently not balanced. You have a deficit of $197,000. Again, we're assuming the property increase of 2.5%. An option would be to prepare for fiscal year 23's plan to cover that deficit, would be to increase the mills by 0.0247 So you would add that to your current millage rate of 5.2974 for a total of 5.3221. And again, that is assuming that the property rates will increase by 2.5%. And then a reminder that looking past 23, the cumulative impact of the GFT reduction of the $2 million annually has a devastating long-term impact on the city's operating revenues and is not sustainable without needing to go up with the millage rate adjustment to offset this loss. And with that, that's all I have. The next slide just tells you the next meetings. And I can take any questions.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Fiore, and everybody else who worked so hard to, excuse me, get us to this point. We'll turn it over to the commission for discussion and eventual action. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I have a question about slide 32. Can you go back to it?
Please, and I'm going to channel Commissioner Gigi Simmons right now. Can you explain it to me like a third grader?
I can try. So, under Florida law, when we collect building permits, we can only, or the fees for building permits, we can only use that money for the enforcement of the Florida Building Code. So when you go down to sustainable development and you pay $500 for your building permit, we put that into a fund. And from that fund, we pay the community builders and the operating costs for running the building division from that. Ideally, what happens is that you collect sufficient building permit fees to pay for your costs. In times where you have lots of building, you tend to build up a surplus. And under Florida law, we're allowed to build up a small surplus that's recently changed. So there's a 4-year expenditure test that we cannot build up a surplus that is more than 4 years of our expenditures, the average of our expenditures. So what we've done, and you recently heard a presentation a couple meetings ago from our rate consultant, that we need to look at the ability to generate higher building permit fees to pay for our expenses or subsidize them from the general fund. Those are our two choices. What you see on this graph in the green is for fiscal year 22 and 23 right now, because we have not adopted new rates. We will be drawing from our fund balance in the building permit fee fund in order to pay for our operating costs on there. So right now it doesn't have an impact on the general fund, but at some point we will run out of fund balance unless we alter our rate, the rates that we charge. And that is what that rate study looked at, and we're working through, based upon the commission's direction, what that would look like, and we'll be bringing it back to you, which is why we've noted that that will probably be after you adopt your budget, but because this is a self-sufficient fund at this point, we don't need to deal with it as an effect on our millage rate on there. So we're comfortable bringing it back to you sometime after October so that you can adopt new rates.
Okay. So in years prior to 2022, would it be safe to say that we had a surplus in the building inspection fund?
Yes.
Okay. So if we had that surplus, then what happened to it?
So the surplus has to stay in the fund, and what you're seeing is that we're planning on using some of that surplus. That's the fund balance. That's what you see in the group.
That's the balance.
Yes.
I've got it. For some reason, when you were talking about fund balance, I thought that you were talking about from the general fund.
No, the building fund's fund balance.
Okay, then that makes complete sense now. Thank you.
Good?
Yep.
Okay, Commissioner Ariola.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ms. Fiore, for that lengthy presentation. It was a good initiation into what I think is going to be a really turnkey budget for this government. Obviously, the big decisions that have been made or on both the GRU side, and then how we're going to deal with the effect on the tax rate over the next few years. Now, for the purposes of this budget, what I would like to do is I would like to give us a little bit more leeway on the tentative, because, as was mentioned, we still don't have commission increments added to this budget, which I would like for us to have the opportunity to have those discussions between now and September on the final adoption. And I think that the numbers that we've been shown, the graphs that we've been shown in terms of how to deal with the effect of the GFT reduction, I think it gives us a pathway to really start to address that issue. So what I would like for us to consider is a potential tentative rate of 5.5, obviously with the opportunity to go down. I think that if we start there, the increase of the new tax rate every year to cover that GFT reduction, because you can't, I mean, the GFT reduction, that graphic, that is what it is. It is going to be a cumulative loss year after year. And I think we can just flatten that tax rate. So instead of having to increase taxes by a certain amount of millage as it's shown every single year, we can actually reduce that increase of what it would be every year by taking that leap. Well, leap is a strong word, by taking that step this year. So I would argue that we just set the tentative for 5.5, but that we obviously retain the right to reduce that for people.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner. And Ms. Fiore, Ms. Wilson, one of you probably knows, do we still have the lowest millage rate in the county? Ms. Ramos is saying yes.
You do.
Yeah.
If I may continue.
Sure.
Right, and so, you know, I don't want to get into the whole philosophical debate right now about the balance between what you pay as a utility customer and what you pay as a property owner. But looking at the change in the millage, our millage is very low, and I think that if you had told me years ago when we were dealing with the GFT issue in the first place, it's been at least a couple of years since it's been on the forefront of the mind of the budget, that's a pretty solid trade-off, I think, because we're going to be putting the utility in a place where we can reach debt defeasance and really get the utilities sort of credit strength back on track without putting an unnecessary burden of taxation on the millage. So I really want to give a lot of credit to our staff, both on general government and on the GRU side, for putting these solutions in front of us, because I think we have a path here, and you know, future commissions I think are going to be grateful for the work that we're able to do, so that we can deal with some of the issues that we all know we've been dealing with in terms of the debt over at GRU. And the outstanding question of the general government debt service, you know, we'll sort that out as we get to the end of the budget, and that is an interesting question that I think we need to get a bit more of detail on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm open to a 5.5 millage tax rate. I still think on the GFT, I think we're doing too many years of 6 or 7 years of lowering the GFT. I think we should only do 3 and then look at it at that time where kind of we are in terms of debt and things like that. It's a dramatic shift, and I think it's too much of a dramatic shift. And when that resolution comes up, I'll bring that up again. There are two things I would like that I think are necessary, and I won't support a budget that doesn't have those. We need to focus on making our streets safer. We have said that Vision Zero and reducing the deaths on our roads is incredibly important, and our public says it's important, but we don't actually fund that. We say that we're going to get there, but we keep on saying we're going to get there, but we don't do anything to actually make that happen. And that's why I think it's important that we start there and start to fund. One of those is street lighting and a street light study to tell us where and how much lighting we need. This would be a one-time $250,000 increment. The number 3 thing that our residents told us in the in the survey that we gave last year, where they wanted us to focus on the next 2 years was on street lighting. Our public knows that there's issues, and this is the first step to starting to address that. The second thing that I believe we should study, or we should fund, well, I think it should be recurring. I'm open to just doing it as a one-time expense of $750,000 for Vision Zero, for us to actually start putting real money to actually start making changes to make our streets safer. It takes capital changes to do things, and we aren't allocating the funds necessary to make it happen. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Sacco.
Mayor, whoever might know the answer, when was the last time we raised the millage?
It was fiscal year, there's actually a slide there. Just want to make sure I'm right. I believe it's fiscal year 2020. I was just double checking.
Thank you. Do you know by how much it was?
Yeah, 0.55.
Okay. It was it was 2019 for fiscal year 20. Or was it
You
in
adopted it
2020?
in fiscal year 19, and it went in place for fiscal year 20.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, so I would not be opposed to the proposed increment, I guess placeholder increment, so that we can work out what we need afterwards. I'm comfortable with going to 5.5 as a placeholder. Hopefully we can come down lower, but to set a place to figure it out, I'm comfortable with that. To Commissioner Hayes Santos' point, I agree that we might have overcorrected when we were trying to address the GFT issue. And given that we would have to increase property taxes by a whole lot, math isn't my strong suit, but a whole lot from what I can see on the chart, I don't think that would be the fairest trade-off, and it's something that we should revisit given the impact it would have on millage to make up for that. So maybe a shorter term or by a less amount or a delayed amount might be a better approach, because I don't want to force all of that onto millage alone. I don't think that's fair. That said, 5.5 would put us at just under, like, maybe 1,700,000. Am I correct? Roughly in that ballpark. Okay. And that would more than enough cover for 2013 to keep us somewhere in that. Do we know how much the commission requested increments are totaling at? We're just still in the figuring out phase. Okay. Okay. Given all that, I'm comfortable with that. I think it's enough of a placeholder, especially for this year and next year, to cover that. I do want to see the total value of our proposed increments, but I understand that we're still figuring out, I guess, the structure, much less the finance of a lot of those increments to figure that out. But I think it's enough to cover us for this year and the next, and I'm comfortable setting that as a tentative for now. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we could do the math ourselves, but would you just tell us real quickly what would an increase to 5.5 would look like per $100,000 worth of home?
$100,000 home with homestead exemption, or I can tell you 200 because I just calculated it. $200 home with homestead exemption would be $30.
$30 annually.
Okay.
Thank you.
To go from 5.29 to 5.5?
Yes.
$30?
Yeah, and Karen and Cynthia and Diane could recalculate that, but. Okay.
About $30, yeah.
$30.
Apparently I can still do my math.
Commissioner Ward, was that it?
Yes, that's all.
Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'm going to the general fund discussion points. So the potential Office of Youth Services adjustment, I would also like to see a placeholder for that at some point in the budget. The commission increments, I've not heard of any, and I've never I've never actually been this far into a budget without understanding what the commission increments are. So I would like to get an understanding of, I bet everybody would at this point, of what that looks like. And the general fund transfer reductions, I am in favor of keeping those as is.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Santos?
Thank you, Mayor. I think if you have commission increments, you should bring them up now, because I think this is where we need to decide if we have the money to take them on or not. I have a lot, but these are the two that I think are the most important that I brought up earlier. Thank you, Mayor.
Commissioner Ariola?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to the point that Harvey made a second ago, when we have the discussion about American Rescue Plan funds, because we have submitted both increments and ARP funding because we really care about our projects, and so we just want to make sure they get in the hopper in one way or another. So yes, I think, Adrian, you're right, let's talk about our increments now, but also at that time, we can amongst ourselves have the discussion about what we would prefer to see as ARP expenditures and what we would prefer to see as general fund expenditures, so that way we can get that sorted, because I think right now that still is sort of in the ether a little bit, but I agree with you. I think the youth services should absolutely be on there as well. Thank you.
Mr. Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So regarding the change in GFT, which I've been supportive of consistently, I'm a little concerned at this point because we're not having this meeting that we're doing for general government for GRU. We had it scheduled tomorrow. We had another one scheduled later in the month, but they disappeared. So that leaves me a little shaky about supporting that cut, because there are questions that I would have liked to ask that we are not going to have the opportunity to ask. Regardless, that's on the agenda for Thursday. But I do have some unease about that since we canceled those two meetings where we were going to talk about the GRU budget. So, thank you.
Well, and I'll explain why they were canceled, because the commission already voted in principle for the rates over the next several years, as well as the drafting of the resolution. So there was nothing left to talk about.
Well, except the expenditures.
We had that discussion.
I don't know. I feel like we detail every year general government a whole lot more than we detail GRU every single year.
I'm not disagreeing with that. We had a meeting where there were proposed expenditure reductions as well as the rate structure. We had a discussion about it, and then we made a vote. Okay. So, we could put them back on the calendar. It was just, I didn't know what there was to discuss since we already took action. Okay. I very intentionally have not proposed any increments this year. And there's really two reasons why. One is that I feel like there are some very important initiatives that this commission has approved and elevated to high priorities that we need to get either to completion or more fully realized. And I'll just bring up one example, the racial equity plan. Wouldn't that process start 3 years ago? Pretty much, right? And we don't have one yet. I want us to focus our time, energy, and resources on getting some of those things operationalized in the organization before we put new things on top. What we're trying to do with the mobility hub, the food security issue, East Side health access, these are all really big things that are, if we add new increments on top of those when they're still not close to being realized, something's got to give. Either those are going to get pushed further out, or the new increments are just going to sort of spin in neutral while we address those other things. So that's really my focus, honestly, for the next 18 months. Four of us are done in 18 months. And we have initialized and elevated lots of very important and I think exciting initiatives. And I want to spend my time, I hope we want to spend our time on making sure that they are fully implemented before we all leave office. The ones that ran on these things and got elected because of these things, and ultimately responsible for making sure they happen. So there's lots of things that I'd love to suggest that would be cool and valuable for our neighbors and make us a better community. And I would be more comfortable doing that if some of these other things were near the finish line versus sort of mid-race. The other reason is the ARP discussion. There is so much incredible good we will do with that money. And again, I want us to focus on being really good stewards of that money, coming to a decision point that we all can feel good about. I mean, we're not all going to get everything that we think is a priority, obviously, but hopefully we can come together as a group and decide that these things over 2 years will really be transformative to our neighbors most impacted by COVID and historically most affected by discriminatory policies. So that's where my mind is. I just want y'all to hear that from me. Really leaning in heavy to the ARP money and leaning in heavy to getting these things across the finish line that have been such a priority to us for so many years. I think if we do that, then we leave the city in a really strong place for the next 4 years. So anyway, that's why I'm not suggesting anything new, but certainly we're all entitled to do that. This is definitely the right time to suggest those things if that's what you want to do. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks, Mayor. For the record, I don't have any commissioner increments.
Thank you. Not even a new refrigerator for that? Sorry, that was an out of order sign. Commissioner Duncan Walker. Sorry, I didn't have my glasses on. I think that's you. Yes.
Thank you, Mayor. I wanted to somewhat ditto what you were saying for very many of the same reasons that you expressed. I don't have any increments either.
Great. Okay. And I'll just, for the Vision Zero, I completely agree. I don't know if this is the way to do it. We need to find a stable funding source that's just completely dedicated to that initiative. And I don't know where. That's why I'd like to have a discussion as a commission over the next few months, with the help of Ms. McCready and some other folks on where we get that from. Whether it's parking revenue or we earmark a certain portion of fines and forfeitures from GPD that will go into a fund for that. I think there's some options there. I just want to have a sort of more focused discussion on where that money comes from and then how we develop a project list and things like that. And I'm certainly willing to have that over the next several months. I'm likely going to support. Well, I don't know. It's certainly we'll wait till we get to the final decision point. I guess if the motion is for a 5.5 millage rate today, I'll vote to support it just so we can get the trend notice out. I'm much more inclined to keep it at the current rate, I think. Much of that because next year, there's a lot of readjustment going on right now with the economy and a lot of outstanding questions that we won't know the answer to until this time next year. obviously, home sale supply is incredibly limited with the home sales escalating prices. You know, what happens to our supply chain issues right now, which should resolve themselves in a year and, you know, create a more predictable and stable overall economy. But that's kind of why I'd rather deal with that next year when we just have a lot more information. There might not be a deficit come this time next year. So I'm going to be a little hesitant to go in the end at 5.5, but I'm willing to do that today just to keep the process moving forward and be able to send out the trim notice. Sorry guys, I'm bold. It's you. Thank you, Commissioner Santos.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll put a motion on the floor, but I think it should be one motion and not split out, because I think we're talking about the budget, and we start splitting things out, it starts to make it, maybe the numbers not work. So I would put forward that we, I don't know if there's anything special I need to say when I put forward a motion, Madam Attorney,
To set the tentative millage rate
to set the millage rate.
Shelley?
There's a resolution in your backup that you all will adopt. Now, depending on if you go with that resolution is currently populated with what the staff's recommendation was. If you all change that, we'll revise the resolution after this meeting and get it to the clerk sometime tomorrow.
Okay.
So, but it would be to adopt the resolution with whatever the millage rate is that you all agree on.
So we adopt the resolution with the 5.5 mils millage rate. Then we have the following increments. In the CRA budget, the job center is added to it as a placeholder. We add a placeholder out of the general fund for the Children's Services Department. We fund the lighting study at $250,000. We fund the Vision Zero improvements for $750,000, and the remaining balance will be put towards the fund balance.
Is there a second? Okay, motion by Commissioner Santos, seconded by Commissioner Ariola, set the millage rate at 5.5 mils with those additional placeholders. Commissioner Johnson.
Thanks. We can
Still split that out, right?
We can.
Yeah, let's do
I mean,
it.
I think the most important thing is what we have to do today is adopt the millage rate.
Yeah, if you can split out the first.
If you can split out the first part, that'd be great. No, actually, if you could split out all. It's just easier to do all of them, I think.
One at a time.
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead.
I specifically didn't want this split out. If we start splitting it out, then we won't have enough money to cover the costs and things like that. So that's why I specifically made this motion. I said it would not be split out.
Well, but you can't say not to split it in the motion. I mean, if a commissioner has ever requested a split, I've granted it.
Yeah, we're talking about budget where we might not have enough money to fund the budget if we don't have enough people voting for the 5 point. Because I'll vote for none of it because I need to make sure that.
Well, let's vote for the millage first, and then we'll see. I mean, if we vote for that millage rate,
Okay.
then it will.
Well, no, if I'm not going to support the millage rate if those other things aren't funded. So I'll maybe vote for the things that are being funded first.
Okay, we can do it that way. So we've got youth department, job center through GCRA. Madam Clerk, what was it? Yeah, lighting, Vision Zero. Is that it? Okay.
Children's Services.
Youth, I said youth department, yeah.
Child and youth department. Commissioner
Thank
Commissioner
you.
Ariola, I can speak, I swear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Would it be all right if, in reference to the discussion about the child and youth office and with the job center, the manager said that he could work with me to come up with some of those figures. Would that be all right if those are the placeholders and if it, we're gonna have to sort this out.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're just putting them in there.
Adrian just came ready with figures for his asks.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's
typical.
I think either way, they are gonna come back to us. This is just putting something in there that's explicit, so, yeah, again, it's just a placeholder.
Just,
come back at final budget adoption.
just dotting the i's and crossing the t's.
Yep, okay. Okay, so we got a motion, 750,000 dollars to go towards, basically, transportation safety. $250,000, up to $250,000 for a lighting study. Item in the GCRA budget, which is really not an increment because there's room in there already, but being explicit about job training, job center, and then a placeholder in the general fund budget for child services or youth services department. Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just for everybody's clarity, particularly people watching at home, this motion is all tentative. This is not to nail down specific numbers in the budget. This is us putting line items in there so we can see how they work together if we increased, again, tentatively to 5.5 mils. So this is not committing to 5.5 mils, nor is it committing to a specific dollar amount for any of these increments we just talked about, nor is it committing to the manager's increments. Those are all still fluid and will remain fluid until September. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so let's open it up for public comment. I will alternate between in-chamber and people calling in, so we'll, no?
Just to
Sure, go
clarify,
ahead.
if we don't, the 5.5 mils doesn't move forward, then I would say none of the other things move forward as well. Is that correct? I would like to tie it to a funding source. Am I?
Well, for the job center, there is a funding source.
Yeah, okay.
For the child services department, I
There's
don't
not a
really
funding
know
source.
until we get a number there, so. I mean, it might be a feasibility study, you know, it might be a relatively small number as we, so. Go ahead, Commissioner Santos.
Yeah, I think if we're putting stuff in the budgets, we should be making sure there's a funding source. Yes, you're right. The CRA has a funding source. The youth services does not have a funding source at this point yet, but I think we should making sure we have funding sources for things we put in the budget. Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah, in principle, I agree with you. We need to pass a balanced budget. Commissioner Ariola?
Yeah, and you know, the reality is if the commission doesn't approve a millage rate that covers the expenses, then those expenses don't happen. It's just the point of fact.
Yeah, the millage rate's locked in, the budget can be amended.
And yeah, I'm completely comfortable starting the office and trusting. I think it'll be fantastic. I think people would love to see that sort of grow over time. We don't need to, yeah, so anyway, just saying that.
Okay, so let's move on to public comment, to the motion on the floor. Again, I'll alternate between people in the chamber and people that have called in, so we'll start with anybody here in person with us tonight that would like to comment to the motion. Anybody?
Get up here and say something.
That's leadership.
I mean, they got all
That's
the time
leadership, Mr.
talk
Shepherd.
before,
Thanks for going
so-
first. Go ahead.
I believe a lot of this talk tonight, we could do it Thursday meeting. My own opinion, I could wait till Thursday, because I still got questions like Commissioner Ward has, Ariel has, and so on. So I would like to keep my comments till Thursday's meetings, because I also have to review the stuff that I have that is coming up on Thursday. So I'd like to withdraw my time and give it to somebody else. So,
Thanks, Mr. Shepherd. And one advantage is that this week we have plenty of meetings to attend and participate in. There's no shortage of every day, basically. All right, who do we have with us tonight? Adam? Larry? Bethany?
This is Bethany too.
Bethany,
yes.
hello. How are you? Good to hear from you again.
Doing well, thank you. We actually have no callers on the line at this time, but we are standing by.
Okay, we'll check back with you in a few minutes. Thank you, Bethany. Okay, next speaker in chambers, please.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Nathan Scott. So, with respect to the proposed motion, millage rate, again, the city, specifically general government, has a spending addiction with taxpayer money. If you look at the slides at the end of the presentation that was given by Mr. Feldman, it talks about options to prepare for deficits, looking past 2023, millage adjustment scenarios. The fact that you're not adopting the rollback rate, I mean, the county has consistently adopted the rollback rate, showing great fiscal responsibility. What does the city commission do last year? Nope, we're not adopting the rollback rate. We're going to take a 5.5% revenue increase on the backs of hardworking Gainesville families, in addition to raising their electric rates. So I guess what I'm saying again is not important.
Well,
that's too much information. So with respect to the additional slides, I'm perplexed. I don't know. It's a star chamber, I guess. So with respect to the other slides, effective cumulative reduction of the GFT, and then budget update, I mean, we get into the end of it where, just spend. And there's no fiscal discipline here, commissioners. You're talking about year after year consecutive millage rate increases. There's no desire to constrain city spending. You want to expand city government, expand city government, expand city government. How are your colleagues that run an entire county across the street able to adopt a rollback rate consistently, but you can't? Thursday, you're poised to enact the largest multi-year unjustified GRU rate increases in GRU's entire history. Again, disproportionately affects low-income people, hardworking Gainesville families, in addition to property tax increases. You haven't considered all the options. You didn't even consider the option I presented, which would have avoided a rate increase, would have reduced the GFT, and done many other things, but you're more concerned with spending other people's money that isn't yours under the auspice of progress, but there isn't any. You're going to force time of use billing on GRU customers. It's just nothing but a money grab by folks that spend money they don't have, continue spending money they don't have, and then ask by party line affiliation to just rubber stamp what causes great financial harm to hardworking Gainesville family and low-income customers. And your only solution to that is to subsidize the problems that you create with taxpayer money. Thank you. Adopt the rollback rate, show some fiscal discipline.
Okay, thank you. Bethany, anybody on the line?
No, sir. No one on the line at this time.
Okay, next speaker in the chamber, please. Thank you, Ms. Malden.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Armando Grundy Gomez. Mr. Mayor, I was watching the meeting yesterday, and some things that I understand of the 5.5, and I'm looking at that. I guess I'm looking at some priorities. I heard your priorities, Mr. Mayor, but the one thing I have a question to, we have to direct everything to you. So I never get an answer, and I've been waiting for 3 or 4 months since the Equal Opportunity Office presented about the solid waste contract. The people that are being affected most in that was District 1 that are being overcharged. So my question would be to the city attorney, Mr. Mayor, is how are you all adopting a new rate and trying to address one harm, but nobody's wanting to ever address how you're going to recompensate the people that are in Commissioner Duncan Walker's district who have been overcharged. People that look like me, Commissioner Johnson, Commissioner Duncan Walker, that have been overcharged and were targeted to be overcharged purposely. So that's never been asked or never been answered. So, Mr. Mayor, I'm directly asking you, just like Pastor Rawls will come here and ask you as well, about how are we going to correct that harm other than saying, oh, you know what, we just passed it and we're going to forget like it never happened. Shh, don't worry about it. The next question I want to talk about is, you all are talking about zero initiative this and zero initiative that, about inanimate objects or certain areas that seem to matter more than others. But guess what? And to Commissioner Ariola's credit, Mr. Mayor, he brought it up yesterday. People are being murdered and dying. Not just hit by cars. Maybe that happens, maybe it doesn't. No, people are actually dying. Happens to be in our district. You know, the one right outside the door here, being shot. And some of y'all are like, oh, no problem here, folks. What are we doing? We gave a 4% increase in the budget to firefighters. For what? Fires are not up. Crime is up. And you did acknowledge that, Mr. Mayor, nationwide. But here, all politics are local. I mean, I know we made much ado when certain folks died when it was on University Avenue. Laurel died, Becky died, and it was like, oh my God, we got to put up this stop sign, and we got to put up this speed limit. People getting shot. Oh, no, those are not our problem, folks. Let more of them die. Just get shot. Meanwhile, we're up here. We have nice officers to your left and to your right. How are we showing them that we're supporting them? Are you taking any of that ARP money and giving it to the police department to actually do something other than this zero nonsense? So how about we have a new initiative, Zero Negroes Dying, this week? That'd be a great initiative, because I'm getting tired of hearing that. And it's kind of tiring, and it's disgusting. And you all just sit there like, no problem here, folks. We'll talk about it on Facebook. So who matters here? Or do we selectively pick and choose? So where are those ARP dollars coming from? Because the president actually gave leadership too and said you can actually give that to law enforcement. The president of these United States said you can actually do that. But you all are saying, well, we're going to spend them on inanimate objects. We're going to spend them here. Your president, our president.
Thank you, Mr. Grundy.
I wasn't, was I over?
You're over. Yep, thanks. Appreciate it. Bethany, you got anybody yet?
Thank you, sir. No callers at this time.
Okay, can we have our next speaker in chambers, please?
Good evening, Mr. Poe, Honorable Commission. My name is Brian O'Brien. I intended on being represented tonight by my attorney, Ray Washington, who Mr. Feldman, I'm told, had dragged out of this chamber. He was jailed, and he has some kind of police order against him to not contact any city commission or city employee and not to be on these grounds. So I'm here by myself tonight. Ms. Fiore mentioned that the impact fees, I guess, are part of the building department, and you were talking about the building department budget. My question is, have the impact fees been reconciled, and has the required reporting been turned into the Florida State and the Auditor General? Mr. Feldman told us that GRU collects the stormwater surcharge on the utility bill. I never knew that. I thought that stormwater was part of Public Works. But now I understand why my friend on 39th Street, where the trucks have ruined the road, because you put in a tree burner that 100 large semi-trucks go to every day, and they're ruining the roads, and the bill is going to hardworking residents, as these gentlemen said, of Gainesville, are paying the bill again. So it's no wonder that no one's calling in for this meeting. The agenda for this meeting was issued today at 3:21 p.m. There's no opportunity for a resident to take this in and evaluate what's going on here. The slide 55, friends and neighbors, is the sad truth. Ms. Fiore glazed over it, but all the millage rates are going up. Everybody in the city and part of the people in the county are going to have to pay the bill for the $1 billion that you have lost. It's a big number. Now I'm hearing we'll have no presentation on the GRU budget. That was new tonight. There was no presentation earlier on the fire assessment. Did I hear we're now going to have no presentation on general government as well?
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
Thank you.
Appreciate your comment. Anybody else in chamber? I don't believe so. Bethany, you got anybody?
Thanks, Mayor Poe. Still no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you for being with us nonetheless. The solid waste discussion has been scheduled. I know I saw it on my calendar. Next Wednesday. Okay, so we'll be having that discussion next Wednesday. Shootings, we take those very seriously. There's not a simple solution. Our police department is working tremendously hard to address this issue. Tremendously hard. They are all tragic. They are facilitated by having far too many guns on the streets and in the hands of, especially lately, young people. And we will continue to work. We just got more money for expanding our interrupters program by another 6 people. That is a very successful program, but you know, this is a systemic problem that we're not going to solve overnight. We should care about shooting deaths. We should care about people who die on our roads. We should care about people who die of COVID. Those are all extremely important. Every life is valuable, and you know, we'll continue working to protect all of it. And then I think Mr. O'Brien mentioned impact fees. I think though what we were talking about were building inspection fees. They have the gap between what it costs us to run that part of our organization and what we collect will be made up through the surplus that's accrued over time. That's what was presented in the presentation tonight. Okay, so we're going to move to a vote. I'm going to go down the list of 4 things that we will, I would say, either add or just clarify, make more explicit in the budget, and then finally we will adopt we will vote on adopting a tentative millage rate of 5.5 mils that will go out on the trim notice. Commissioner Sacco?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Math is not my strong suit, so we're going to talk about the 4 placeholders and then the millage.
Correct.
Okay, because I heard 4 items and I thought, no, there's 5, but we're good. Thank you.
So everybody clear? So I'll say each one before we vote on it so we know what we're voting for. So the first one, whether we call it Child Services or Youth Services Department, placeholder, all in favor of that, say aye. All opposed? Motion passes 6-1 with Sacco in dissent, including a job training item in the GCRA portion of the budget. All in favor say aye. All opposed? Motion passes unanimously, including up to $250,000 for a lighting study. All in favor say aye. All opposed? No. That motion passes 5-2 with Johnson and Duncan Walker in dissent, and a $750,000 increment to go towards protecting safety on our, transportation safety. All in favor of that, say aye. Aye. All opposed? No. That motion passes 6-1 with Johnson in dissent. This next one will be a roll call vote. It's to adopt the resolution, including a 5.5 millage rate. Madam Clerk, roll call vote.
Just for the record, I am going to briefly read in the resolution before we go to roll call.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. A resolution of the City Commission of the City of Gainesville, Florida, relating to the levy of general municipal purpose ad valorem taxes for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2021 and ending September 30th, 2022, establishing a proposed millage rate, computing the rollback rate, setting a public hearing, providing for notice to the Alachua County property appraiser, and providing an immediate effective date. Commissioner Sacco? Aye. Commissioner Ward? Aye. Commissioner Ariola?
Aye.
Commissioner Hayes Santos?
Aye.
Commissioner Johnson?
No.
Commissioner Duncan Walker?
Nay.
And Mayor Poe.
Aye, that motion passes 5-2 with Johnson and Duncan Walker in dissent. Okay, our next item up is public comment. Anything people want to share with us that was not on our agenda tonight? We'd love to hear from you now. Welcome.
Oh, Commissioners, Nathan Scott. So as the mayor and the city commissioner are probably aware, the Board of County Commission denied the Orgis application for the solar project, which was being dumped in the midst of a historic rural African American community. I'm hopeful, in light of that denial, that this city commission and you, Mayor Poe, can take the opportunity to engage in a constructive, community-wide re-envisioning effort to find a more appropriate location for this project. Now, I'm here that my sources, you're indifferent to that, the commission's indifferent. The commission's been silent. The reason the commission's been silent is because GRU ceded away final site approval authority in another heavily redacted contract. Okay, I would hope that the denial that was received from the county commission would have put the city commission and GRU back in the driver's seat to have an intelligent discussion to honor the request of numerous property owners, overwhelming public opposition to this being dumped in the middle of a historic rural African-American community, and engage in a constructive community-wide re-envisioning process to find a more appropriate location. Apparently that's not the case. Apparently they're going to continue to push that in there. So this is where the city commission becomes important, Mayor Poe. This is where actions speak louder than words. You talk about equity. You talk about systemic racism. Equity doesn't stop at the city limits. So I'd like to know personally what you are going to do as a city commission, what you are going to do as a mayor to stop this environmental injustice and environmental racism from happening, because there is another appropriate site that's far closer to the substation that could be used that doesn't have these impacts. But are you going to just allow your out-of-town developer in another heavily redacted contract and sit silently while you let this racial injustice occur? Because that's on you. And if you really want the cannon to swing around to you now, Mayor Poe, and the city commission, and for you guys to be held accountable for sitting silent on the back bench while they continue to bulldoze and force us into a community that doesn't want it, then I hope you're prepared to answer for your hypocrisy. What I expect is a GRU customer and a city taxpayer would be for you guys to practice what you preach consistently, because I hear equity toolkit, equity, equity, equity. Where's equity in this? Where's equity in letting your out-of-town developer, your partner, continue to push a bad position instead of doing the right thing? When does it become so difficult and hard to do the right thing? Better options exist. You can be part of that dialogue, Mayor Poe, and it's on you if you're not. Thank you.
Okay, one sec. Yeah.
I'm vaccinated, so it's not me.
You can both get it and transmit it if you're vaccinated. You good?
No, I do. Anyway, I don't want to address that. I want to give some solution of something we could do. I agree with you, Mr. Mayor, Armando Grundy Gomez. I do agree with you about the police department working very hard. Some solutions of things that we could probably do to assist Chief Jones, GPD, our friends and people that live around us in that community. We've had some things for a long time now, and nobody wants to address the elephant in the room. Let's just address it. Shoot 'em up Sundays, it happens every Sunday. Some people call it peaceful. Some people call them shoot 'em up. But shoot 'em up Sundays have been happening. People have been murdered. American Legion, less than a mile down the road at near the McDonald's and the car wash, murders. I think we need to indefinitely, for a while, close TB McPherson until we can get a handle and start addressing the violence, because nobody wants to address it. All of you all have been deathly silent, every one of you, on this issue. I know a neighbor of mine in Duval, twice, over 23 shots near her house, not far from Commissioner Duncan Walker and her community. Twice. Ask Juanita Miles Hamilton. Police reports are there. That's a fact. She's talked to the city manager. I have other friends and neighbors of mine that have had shootings, sometimes loud music being played. I think one of the commissioners said they did a police ride-along and confirmed these things are happening. I don't know which one of the commissioners was. I forgot who it was. Was it you? It might have been you, Commissioner Duncan Walker. But somebody did a ride-along. So maybe something we can do is to start to address the elephant in the room is shoot 'em up Sunday. That's a great start. But we need to show our support for Chief Jones, for the GPD Police Department, and not have these things that are distractors because they're doing our job and saying we want to investigate them and harangue them for doing their job. Do you all know, here's a fun fact. It's not a fun fact, it's just a fact. There are officers that serve low-level warrants all the time and lose their lives. Happens. Happens all the time. Don't believe it? Look at the FBI crime statistics. Ask the Department of Justice. But when we have leadership from up here that wants to harangue and say, we want to investigate them, for what? Them doing their job? When a judge signed a warrant? It's completely inappropriate when it's not in your purview or in the charter power to say we're going to investigate the police chief, or we're going to investigate, or we want to publicly shame them for doing their job. They're doing their job. And you don't have to tell me because I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brian O'Brien, this representation thing is not easy. You have to show up and look good, have done all your homework. Mr. Poe, that was a typical performance tonight where you recharacterized the question that I asked you. I asked for Ms. Fiore to explain the impact fee reconciliation, which was not done when the CAFR was ran through in a special city commission meeting. Your city auditor would not participate in that nonsense because she could not perform the duty that's required by the rule 10.550. The impact fees were not reconciled. They're required to be reported, and they're supposed to be sent to the Florida State and the Florida State Auditor General. That's the question for Ms. Fiore. Anybody who did not see Mrs. Cleveland and her group, the Robinson family, who were across the street at the Alachua County Commission meeting, should look that up. It's absolutely the most impressive presentation that I have ever seen of historical Black community in Alachua County. They brought a group of folks and talked about their relatives and how they got that land. And the city commission runs GRU, and they're trying to dump an industrial use in these people's backyard. And that type of thing that you are orchestrating is what drives me to come back and visit Gainesville and try to represent the best I can for my friends and neighbors and the people of Gainesville and Alachua County who you're pushing this waste that you created. 12 years of city involvement. You and the former mayor, whatever her name was, I never met her. $1 billion wasted. Another group from out of town figures, Nathan says this group, Loris, is this investor group, they could care less about the people of Gainesville. But there's a lot of people, good people that do care. And it doesn't surprise me a bit that you said 18 months you're going to be out of here, 4 of you are going to be out of here. I'm sure you're going to hit the door running. Leave it for other folks to clean up. And this is nothing new. This is the history of this area.
Thank you, Mr. O'Brien.
I'm done.
Anybody else in chamber? Yeah, one sec, Mr. Shepherd, I'd get the place cleaned up for you. Mr. Shepherd.
Yes, my name's Don Shepherd, the People's Representative, and as Mr. Blonde talks about this East Side party that went over there, I've been to it, and I seen what went on. And as an officer, I do not tolerate a citizen coming to this podium and speaking down our officers. Our officers acted accordingly and directed. They got it under control because I know I was there. And I tell you for a fact that I didn't see the Mr. Blundy. I didn't see these people that say that he mentioned at this. Can this be? So for him to come in here and these people to come in here and to down you and to down these officers in a manner which has happened even earlier today, I can't sit here and tolerate. I'm not going to tolerate. I'm going to tell them they need to take and review the information before they talk. That's why I took earlier the time to say that I would withhold my comments until Thursday's meeting, because I myself have not went out there, read the documents that are needed for me to make a proper statement. So, what needs to happen as far as these people is more police accordingly to those areas, so that those people that act unrighteous towards our officers and others be stopped right there and then. And our officers have been doing the best job they can do without being on top of these people, correcting them like children, and that's what it would be. And so I want to thank you all for doing what you're doing, and thank our officers for what they've done, and our security people. And one of my best friends is a security officer, and I'll tell you, they do a superb job. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Bethany, do you have anybody for general public comment?
Mr. Mayor, no callers at this time.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Feldman, did you want to address the impact fee question?
I did. I wanted to point out that Mr. O'Brien is correct that the city does not file an impact fee statement with the Auditor General because we don't levy impact fees in the city.
Thank you. All right, on to member comment. Any member comment? All right, with that, we are adjourned. Everybody have a great evening.